Hello, I am Leon E. Chief Fraser. Chiefs has been coined because of my 40 years in law enforcement, and 12 of those years happen to be as chief of police. And I tell you, there are no more powerful positions other than president. And, those kind of people own this land than police chiefs because they hold your life in their hands in so many community situations. I have with me a sheriff that is very unusual, Sheriff Andre Brunson. Sheriff Brunson made sure that his inmates got election opportunities and voting opportunities. He made sure that they got counted in the census. And he also made sure that they got vaccinated, those who were willing, during this pandemic. Sheriff, that's very unique. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. How you doing?
Super fine. Then we have a city police chief here, young buck. Got that power, got that influence, but he has the attitude and he has the demeanor and the willingness to take care of this community called Tuskegee. Come on with it, brother chief. How are you doing today?
I'm
Lloyd
doing
Jenkins.
I'm doing good, Chief. How's everybody doing today?
Very
Doing
good.
great.
And I'm not going to make our sister last now. I'm going to tie our sister into this. She is an attorney. She is not a police chief, but she wields power and knowledge. And I've been watching her on a task force that we have in this area that involves all relevant entities in this community. And this sister is dynamite, capable, and on the case. Krista James, the Miss Attorney, how are you today?
I am well, Chief Fraser. Thank you so much for having me, and it's wonderful to see you all. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
Oh,
afternoon.
Good
okay, now we go
afternoon.
to the university where they are turning out giants still after Booker T and uh, uh, George Washington Carver and all of those people, set up that university and turned it loose on this world and made footprints in the sands, not only in the United States, but over in our motherland. We have the chief of police, Chief Patrick Morris. How are you doing today, sir?
Good morning, Chief Frazier and fellow panelists. It's an honor to be here this afternoon.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of you for being here, and I want the sheriff to speak about the difference in jurisdictions here in law enforcement. What is your role in this community?
Well, as the sheriff, I'm the highest law enforcement officer in the county and definitely the highest elected official in the county. So my jurisdiction runs through the whole county. But jurisdiction-wise, we all have a part of the county, which I'm here to make sure that all these guys are successful in my eyes. I offer support to each and every one of these guys here in the county within their jurisdiction. So definitely being the sheriff is a big job. And the way I see it, I'm just kind of making sure that all the other agencies are successful by backing them and doing the things they need me to do in the county and
Okay,
providing
what's
support.
okay, sir? Thank you so very much. Chief Jenkins, what's your role?
Okay, can you hear me? All right, I'm the Chief of Police for the city of Tuskegee. My main responsibility is to cover the city limits and police jurisdiction for the city of Tuskegee. We work hand in hand with the University Police, also the Sheriff's Department too, in any aspect that we can to assist them. We also have neighboring jurisdictions such as Franklin and Notasoga, and we have mutual aid agreements to where if they need help for anything, we'll respond to assist them in those issues.
Chief Martis, what's your role?
I serve as Director of Public Safety for the university, responsible for protecting almost 3,000 students and 700 faculty and staff members. We serve in a joint jurisdiction with the Macon County Sheriff. We are deputized through the Sheriff's Office, and we all work together hand in hand to make sure that Macon County is safe.
And Attorney James, you have a monumental responsibility over that with that cream of the crop that we have coming through Tuskegee from all over the world. What is your role, ma'am?
Yes, sir. I serve as a faculty member in the College of Veterinary Medicine in the Department of Graduate Public Health, and I also have the privilege of leading that group as the department head. Since COVID-19, I've had an opportunity to work more closely with our cabinet leadership and our president as a special assistant to the president for COVID-19 recovery, and also work with our communities through our public health outreach as well as through our COVID-19 mitigation planning.
Thank you, ma'am. And I sure do appreciate the role that you are playing at that university because you are taking care of some serious business. Now, let's talk about the police here for a minute, guys. We have the talk about defunding police. We have that talk about getting rid of qualified immunity. People love to get off on talking about the police. And when somebody come around with something negative, so many people are willing to jump on that bandwagon. But those two things to me represent dumping somebody into the ocean and not giving them a boat nor a paddle and expecting them to get back to the dry land. Now they expect top efficiency and top effectiveness from police, but there's so many people who don't understand how relevant it is to keep your police well funded and well trained and well held accountable for what they must do in your community. Let's go with the young man first. What, Chief Jenkins, what's your thoughts about this getting rid of qualified immunity and defund the police versus the job that you have to do in this community?
Okay, so let's talk about the defunding factor. Um, as everybody on this panel knows that we already work with limited funding and limited resources already. Um, Now there are some aspects in law enforcement that we need to increase on. There's some things that we need to add to it, but my perspective on defunding it is it's not that. Now, what needs to happen is that law enforcement and other community organizations need to come together and come up with different ways of handling different situations as far as dealing with mentally disturbed people or people with mental illness, people dealing with, I guess, the no type of resources as far as drug addicts or anything like that. That's why law enforcement and these community organizations need to get together to come and formulate a plan so we can get those resources out. Like with myself now, I try to reach out to different organizations, especially dealing with people with addictions. Addictions and mental illness, these are the things that we come in contact with that really, you can't put them in jail because there are other issues there, but you want to get them the help that they need. And a lot of times you don't have the resources to get them there. And when you say defunding the police, we're already limited on our resources. We need more funding to actually deal with those things.
Did you get it right, Sheriff?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely. I concur with what he's saying. You talk about defunding the police. We need to put more money into what we're doing when, especially here in the state of Alabama, you're talking about the mental health issue, especially. We've closed most of the mental health places, and now we have to deal with these people every day out on the streets, you know, with no help. You know, you bring mentally ill people into jail, which the jail is not designed for mentally ill people. So we have to come up with ways to deal with people like that. And you talking about defunding us and taking money, you should be adding money to what we're doing because we have to deal with more problems when you take away other resources from the other agencies and even from us.
And
You know,
Sheriff,
mentally ill people, you know. Yes, go ahead.
yeah, let me ask you this. Now, the county of Macon have too little funds
Yes,
to really take care of the business in this area.
right.
Yet, when the pandemic
Definitely.
hit, you could not get what you needed from the county in order to be proactive and getting PPE equipment and building an isolated unit in order to take care of inmates that may have tested positive. What did you have to go through in order to rake and scrape the funds to be able to do that while people are talking about taking away funds from you?
Man, I had to really rake and scrape to get a pandemic building built, a COVID center built to house the inmates that were coming in that might test positive for COVID. You know, one of the things about the jail being in an isolated situation, you bring somebody into a jail with COVID and you get the other inmates infected. I mean, it wouldn't for everybody in the jail to be infected with COVID. So we had to find a way to isolate the people coming in so we didn't have a chance of getting the COVID inside the jail. And I took a little place and just built it into a COVID center. I got a shed, just went and bought a shed, and I got somebody to come in and we turned it into a very nice COVID center so we can keep them isolated with no funds. You know, I had to scrape all those funds up with which I never got paid for, you know, but it's worth its weight in gold when it comes to keeping our inmates safe down there.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
And I have to say thank you too to Miss James, though. I'm sorry, Chief. Miss James came down and they actually tested our inmates down there so we could get the COVID shot. So, I mean, definitely have to give her up because they did that free of charge. If I didn't have them, then I wouldn't even got these guys tested.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute because this unified effort between the university and the city is like I've never seen before. And I've been in this town for 20 years. And I've heard talk about town and gown, you know, but I hadn't seen it until COVID hit. And then all of a sudden, all of us came together
Everybody
as
came
interested
together.
organizations, and miraculous things have happened, man, in this community since we've been apart. Chief, what's your take on what the young chief had to say about defunding and taking away qualified immunity? How can you held police officers accountable for all of what they have to deal with in the community and all that has been dumped on them in the community, and want to take away qualified immunity so that they will have to fend for themselves? Won't that make police officers more dysfunctional or more willing to take care of business?
I think it will make the system highly dysfunctional. Chief Jenkins hit the nail on the head when he talked about dealing with mental illness. These are some of the things that police departments were never designed to handle. We were not mental health officials. We were there to prevent crime, to provide public safety. Now we're having to increase our training of the officers so that they can deal with such situations both safely and humanely. So we have the joint initiative here in Macon County that if you're failing to train, you're definitely training to fail. So we have to increase our training. We have to share our assets, work together, because the problems aren't just in the gates of Tuskegee. The problems go out to the county. The county problems come into the community and the campus. So we all have to work together to handle those problems.
Attorney James, I noticed that federal Judge Parker ordered nearly 12 of former President Trump's attorneys sanctioned up to and including disbarment. Is that good or bad for your profession as a lawyer?
I would definitely like to speak on that question, but I would like an opportunity to take a bite on the police reform issue
Right
too,
ahead.
if you allow me. One of the things I definitely would like to say about Macon County is that you are very unique in the way that the law enforcement system works together and actually tries to do what the legacy of the Black Panther Party, which started right here in Alabama, wants us to do: serve people body and soul, and actually does has social justice in its heart of policing. But I think the call for the type of reform that we're talking about is steeped more so in a legacy that happens outside of spaces like this, where you have a unified police effort that's actually looking for the benefit of all citizens. And when you talk about issues like legal intervention, which includes injuries inflicted by the police or other law enforcement agents in the course of arresting or attempting to arrest lawbreakers and suppressing disturbances and maintaining order, it is the number of deaths that are associated with that each year is phenomenal. And the impact that it has not only on Black bodies, because it is mostly people of color who are negatively impacted by legal intervention, but it's also impact on the psyche of everybody in the community. I, as a mother of a young girl I'm trying to teach to drive, she has flat refused to want to learn. And because when I was pulled over by a state patrol officer, she was literally shaking like a leaf, because in her mind, a white police officer is going to kill us if he comes to her car. And I had to try to unpack that for her. And so it is, I think, while I do think some of the reform that was mentioned in that completely getting rid of qualified immunity is probably not the right answer, we have to acknowledge and accept that outside of spaces where you have people that look like you that are in charge of your other policing systems, that there is a significant number of attack on the Black and brown bodies. And that's why you have this outcry from organizations like Black Lives Matter that are talking about reforming police departments.
Okay, very interesting. And I still want to get back to that question that I asked you about that sanctioning move by Federal Judge Parker, but I'll hold that for just a minute because I want to chime in on something you said that is very significant. Now, unpacking that for your daughter, that is super important, because if she has internalized the stereotype, and if it's unattended by the parent, then she is going to add on probably more negatives to that and be impacted negatively for a long time to come. Now, you are a good mother and you are an intelligent mother, and you know that. But just think about the community parents who will come in and condone whatever it is she thinks and dump more negative on top of that without unpacking anything. And when I look at police reform, I'm looking at beginning with the community, the immoral community, the unfit community, the community who are ignorant and don't care about learning. As long as those situations are not dealt with, you are hard put to dump a police officer into all of those situations and then all of a sudden expect the police officer to be a genius or a magician in order to make things better. So I want to really say I appreciate that thing that you said as a mother. 100% parents have got to start unpacking the negative and unbundling, I call it too, the negative from the positive, so that their children can get a fair interpretation of what's going on out there. Now, what is the police doing, Sheriff? How do you deal with unethical behavior of police officers under your command?
But definitely we don't put up with that at the Macon County Sheriff Office. If we get a complaint, I tell everybody to put it in writing. And once I get it in writing, I definitely deal with whoever they are talking about, whichever officer it is, whichever secretary it is, whichever dispatch it is. Whenever we get a complaint in writing, we call them in, we talk to them. We definitely don't allow anything unethical when it comes to our officers, and it depends on what they have done and how serious it is. Then we deal with it accordingly. And it could be getting a letter to them. It could be you know, asking them to resign, it could be fine. Whichever we need to do to make sure that they are ethical in what they are doing.
Well, I've seen you do all of those things, so I know that you tell them some truth.
Definitely.
Chief Martis, how do you deal with unethical behavior in your department?
Well, I had the honor this year to serve as president of the Alabama Police Chiefs Association, which consists of 375 agencies in the state. We met with legislative officials, and a law was passed in Alabama this year that requires all police, law enforcement use of force be investigated by an outside agency, and the results be forwarded to the Alabama Peace Officer Training Commission. This is the agency that certifies police officers. So that's going to prevent people who have use of force complaints from jumping from department to department. It's going to bring back ethical behavior in the law enforcement community. You know, it's a shame, you know, we talk about 375 departments. It only takes one bad officer to make all of us look bad. And that's where we are now with the situation that Attorney James mentioned. It's only a few bad police officers, but they needed to be weeded out. They needed to be fired and out of the profession.
Okay, and Attorney James, that brings me back to you and back to the question that I asked you about the federal judge's opinion about dealing with some lawyers who were misbehaving. Again, I ask you, is that good or bad for your profession?
It is excellent for my profession. When we take our oath and we become certified to practice law, it is depending on, I guess, the judge that swears you in, but it is definitely the whole process of licensure is a privilege. It is not something that you have a right to just because you went to law school and just because you passed the bar. It is a privilege that you every year have to get recertified to do by taking legal training, as well as having your license renewed by the state bar. And I think it is incumbent upon judges to do exactly what she did to keep the profession from having to bear the brunt of having, as you are indicating, a few bad apples, making us all look like we are out there filing frivolous lawsuits and doing things just to hang the process up instead of actually seeking justice. So I am very proud that those lawyers were sanctioned in that manner. And I think depending on their level of behavior and their pattern of practice, I don't think they should be allowed to practice again because practicing law is a privilege. It's not a right.
Well, I want to thank you, ma'am. And let me say this. Somebody just mentioned decertification. And let's associate this with that disbarment thing we just talked about. Everybody within the hearing of our voices today, you need to clearly understand that just giving a reprimand or just suspending or just firing a really bad police officer is not enough. Every community in the hearing of our voices, you must go for decertification of police officers who misbehave in a way that bring death or serious harm to anybody. Because see, if a police officer is able to come to Tuskegee and ramrod his way through, he get fired from Tuskegee, then he can go down to Auburn and get a raise for joining Auburn Police Department. So forever remember, citizens and organizations and police chiefs especially, these bad apples, police officers, need to be decertified so that they cannot operate as law enforcement officers anywhere. What do you say about that, Sheriff? What do you think about that?
Well, I think you're telling the truth. You know, once you got a bad apple, you know, a tiger don't change his stripes overnight. And it's unfortunate that it's only a small percentage of the officers that are bad apples, you know, and I don't call those guys officers. Some people are there just to do what they're doing. and not just to create havoc within different communities, you know, whether they're Black communities, white communities, or whatever. And we don't need them in our ranks. So if you have a bad officer, you got a bad officer, everybody needs to know, and that officer don't need to be hired nowhere ever again if that's what he's there for. And like I said, it's only a small percentage of officers that are like that, and I don't call them officers. If you're truly an officer, a servant of your community, and you're here to do the right thing, you wouldn't dare think of harming anybody or doing anything the wrong way. I know I love my job. I know the chief. I know both chiefs. I know everybody here love the job, and we try to make sure that it's done right in our community. But we see so many things happening in other communities, especially to people of our color, which we got to play our part to make sure those officers never officers again if they're found doing the wrong things.
Yeah, that's true.
Chief Martis, what do you think?
I totally agree. I totally agree. You have to weed them out. We have to stop this jumping from department to department. If you remove that certification, then you prevent that. Now, I've seen more, and I'm gonna call it justice. I've seen more justice in Alabama, you know, and we got a bad history in Alabama, but I've seen more justice in Alabama among the law enforcement ranks in the last 3 years than I've seen in my 40-year career. We have sheriffs that's been removed from offices. We've had officers that's been imprisoned for all misconduct. And so I'm 100% positive that that's the way that we're going to clean up the profession of law enforcement and bring back the citizens' trust.
Chief Jenkins, as a young chief, do you have the same opinion as the older chiefs here?
I do. Just like everybody said, when you have those bad officers, you got to make sure that stops with you and they don't go out to another department to do the same thing. And I like that legislation was passed to where we have to report it, because it does fall through the cracks sometimes. But once it gets reported to APOS, that's statewide. So once another agency hires them and it's a lock on their file, they can't, because they have to call APOS, and then APOS has to give a character review whether or not that person should still be a police officer.
Tell me this, Attorney James, speaking to all of the young people out there, what's the most satisfying thing about being an attorney in America?
Wow, that's a great question. I think one of the most satisfying things for me is the ability to be able to hang my own shingle and to know that I could start my own business, which I did for several years in Atlanta. I had a private practice for over 15 years, and to be able to choose to take the cases that I felt were important and that would be most meaningful to my community. But in a broader sense, I think having a license to practice law for those people who may aspire to do it, it gives you the ability to not only be able to feed yourself by having your own practice, but to be able to serve your community in a way that and many times they don't get properly served. And so being able to help, even when I'm not involved in the case, but just give advice to family and friends about matters that involve our legal system, and staying abreast of those issues that I think that are important for our community to be engaged around. I think it is an awesome opportunity for you to be of service and also to earn a very decent living.
And let me add to that question now. Is there any easy way to become an attorney, or must young people prepare themselves if they want to pursue that profession?
Chief, I could tell you, I saw people walk out of law school in the second year. There's nothing easy about that. It is designed to be a very oppressive environment in and of itself. In law school, anybody who goes to an accredited law school, after your first year, the bottom third of the class is dismissed and you're sent home. And at some schools, after your second year, there's a second cut. So when people come out of law school and they are barred in a state, they have met some pretty high hurdles as far as their academic rigor. But the one thing I don't think that law school does well, and I think it actually perpetuates negatively, is the type of competition that it creates, because of that, it does not build a type of character, and it does not promote the type of character that you need to be a good servant, because having the ability to practice law is a pretty big stick, and you have an opportunity to serve or be destructive.
Now, we've talked about ethics and policing, but let me ask you this, and help me to understand this, and perhaps the public can understand it too. Now, there's a confidentiality between lawyer and client, and you are held to that by your oath that you spoke of. Now, your client come in, he just shot somebody, and he tell you that I shot that sucker because I was sick and tired of him looking at me. Now, you know he's guilty. But now, when you get to court, you are saying my client is not really guilty. How do you deal with that thin line of truth versus lie?
Well, first of all, Chief, that's why I didn't practice criminal law, because my spirit don't sit well with that. But I could tell you the argument is this: is that whether a person is actually guilty or innocent is, in this most criminal law says, not the responsibility of the lawyer. It is the responsibility of the judicial system to actually use the tools that have been set up in the law and actually prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And so as a lawyer, it is my job for my client to make sure that they have provided the necessary evidence to prove that they did it.
Okay, thank
because
you.
you do have people who will come into your office and try to convince you that they committed a crime because they're trying to cover for someone else. And that happens too, more often than you would think. And so many times attorneys, we always assume that what the client says, what the prosecutor says, and then the truth is somewhere in the middle. And so you your job as an advocate is to make the system actually get to the actual truth of the matter.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that clarification. Chief Martis, what's the most satisfying to you as being a law enforcement official?
Well, the most satisfying part of my career, like I said, I've been doing this for 40 years now, but it's nothing like being a campus police chief. We have maybe 3,000 students that come through here per year. And out of that 3,000, you have maybe 5 to 8 that really forgot why they came here. The most satisfying part of it is years down the road when you're somewhere like over in Atlanta and you see a student that you don't even remember the student, but they remember you. And they'll walk up to you and say, man, thanks for what you did for me when I was in school. You were like a father to me. And man, it almost brings you to tears sometimes. It's real gratifying.
Well, you're absolutely right about that, because the most satisfying job I have ever had was at Central State University in Ohio. And I labeled myself their grandpa away from home. And every registration, I was standing right there at the head of the line, or had an officer designated to do it, to hand out my business card for every parent who brought a child to campus. And we made it clear to them that once your child do anything that he or she does not have any business doing, you will be called first before we take any action. And we're going to put that child on the telephone and let them tell you in their terms what they did. And then we're going to take the telephone and tell you the truth about the evidence that we have. And then we will all be in on what the final situation is going to be. So you're absolutely right. There's nothing like that atmosphere, man, or that environment. Sheriff, what's your most satisfying thing about being a law enforcement official?
Well, I tell you, it's been so many things, Chief, over the years. And you can think back to delivering chicken to people that needed food, delivering water to people that needed food, just being there and seeing the smile on the people's face when you turn up and do the things that they need, whether it's protecting the community, whatever. But I got a story. You know, my best friend was killed 30 years ago when I was a student at Tuskegee University playing football. My roommate, he was my roommate, my best friend. He was shot at a off-campus party, and his family didn't get justice till years later. But it was then that I decided I was going into law enforcement to try to prevent that hurt that I felt, that somebody got away with hurting my friend, that murdered my friend. I didn't want anybody to feel that hurt, and they couldn't do anything about it. And like I said, I decided then that I was going in law enforcement, and it's satisfying to just bring these criminals to justice and at least give closure to the families when they hurt the way I heard it, the way my friend's family heard it. You know, it's just so many things in this job that's satisfying. You know, it's just satisfying being a law enforcement officer. I say that because we do so much good in the communities and we do so much good in the world. And it's definitely satisfying to see the smiles on the faces of the kids in the community. You know, when we do something good, for the families, you know, when I see that the families know they're safe, you know, it's just a good, satisfying feeling. It's just so many, I can't name one.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, man, about your involvement because I've never seen, and I've heard of driver's license checkpoints and all kinds of things in law enforcement, but you're the only law enforcement person I've ever seen that had a chicken checkpoint.
Yes, definitely.
Whereas after the tornadoes over in Lee County, all the chicken was left over that was sent in for a community benefit. And the sheriff called you and asked you if you wanted to help to distribute it. And I saw you go get a whole trailer full of frozen chicken and
Yeah.
then set up checkpoints throughout the community and pass frozen chicken out to people. So,
Yes.
you're a sheriff like I've never seen before. And I really appreciate that innovative and creative attitude that you have and proactive attitude
Yes.
that you have. Now, let's go to our youngin' here now. Chief Jenkins, what's the most satisfying thing of being a young police chief in this complicated, immoral, hard to cope with society that we are dealing with now?
Well, like everybody said, it's so much that you see over your years. But a couple of things that stand out to me is one, seeing officers that you mentored go on to be successful. That's one thing that I love about this field, especially when they go on to be police chiefs, lieutenants, or head over special division. I mean, it's gratifying because you see your knowledge being passed on. And also, when I worked in the school early on, is that you see those kids that you work with, they grow up, and the next thing you know, you see a officer walking towards you, and you're like, "Hey, you remember me?" And you look at like, "Hey, I remember you 6th grade, 7th grade," but now they're police officers. And then the other thing that really stood out to me the other day was my son came home from school. I have an 18-year-old and I have a 9-year-old, but my youngest son came to me, and he brought me some papers home from school, and they was asking him like his goals. So one of the goals, they asked him what he wanted to be, and he drew a policeman. And that kind of stuck to me because it's like I see the stuff that we go through now in law enforcement, and you try to show him the better side, and for him to say that he still wants to be a police officer, that really touched my heart. So that's what I got.
Okay, well, I tell you, I really appreciate you guys for bringing some truth here today. Let me ask you this, and I'm going to start with our sister again. Uh, Attorney James, what's your charge to the community?
Well, in these COVID days, my charge to the community is, first of all, if you haven't been vaccinated and you need an opportunity, there are plenty of places, and the university is a vaccine site. We can get that to you. But even if you are fully vaccinated with this Delta variant and the variants that will come behind it, please continue to mitigate. Please continue to wear your mask. You have, in order for us to be able to keep community spread down, we have to, I know we're tired and everybody wants to go back to normal, but I think we're going to have to accept and create a new normal. And we have to continue to keep ourselves and also our most vulnerable members of the community safe by wearing our masks, washing our hands, and remaining, continuing to be physically distanced when we're in any crowded area. And from a social justice perspective, when we look at over time, we have had Black scholars that have been writing about the assault on Black bodies since the early 1900s. This is not something new, but I do think that we're in a time and in an era where if we continue to model like what's here in Macon County, where all of the community leadership can come together to address the problems of the people, that we could be a model for the entire country of how to actually maintain the health mentally and physically of our community members.
Chief Jenkins,
Yes, sir.
what's your charge to the communities?
My charge is that we need to stop perpetuating false narratives. And if we see something, we need to not just show the negativity or the negative things that's going on. We need to make sure we get out here and spread these positive messages also. Like we said before, the police are not going to be able to fix everything. We're not a key that fits everything. So both groups need to come together, work together to formulate a plan to make sure we raise a village the right way.
Chief Martis.
We need to send the message that we, especially this group here, we as chiefs, we serve our community. And the best service that you can give your community is to get out in the community and meet those people that you're serving. It gives me great pleasure when students call me Uncle 12. I know that they're familiar with me and they respect me. But then again, respect is something that's earned. It's not just because we have the power of this badge. It's not something that should be abused. And so we should be out there in the community, meeting our constituents and letting them know that, hey, we're here for you.
Sheriff Brunson.
Chief, say that one more time what the question was.
I just want to know, what's your charge to the community, man, with what you are seeing and what you're thinking, what you're doing? How can this community help you and help themselves?
Well, I think the community can view and help themselves by working with us. You know, we're definitely always trying to work with the community, but people got to understand that we are not the enemies. You know, we get lost into the community and ourselves get lost in the personal issues about the police officers, which is what's going on right now. But we just want everybody to know, and it's up to us to educate the people that we are part of the community. We are part of them, and we got to keep letting them know that we are part of this community. You know, we have a job to do and we're going to do it to the best of our ability, but we got to be charged with bringing the community together with all these agencies to make sure we are all working together for one common goal. And that's to keep this community safe, keep everybody thriving, and make sure that everybody's protected and feeling safe here. We're all here to raise these kids, to raise these parents, to raise each other, make sure we're all happy and safe in this community. So we got to get together, all the agencies, to make sure that we let everybody know why we're here.
And I'm going to nail the nail in this communication. People, you are what you eat, what you drink, what you think, what you say, and what you do. And if you are being the best that you can be, working with your own self to take care of you, if you are working with teachers and attorneys and law enforcement people and first responders of all kinds to make this society a better place, well, then you are part of the solution that is necessary to make this world a better place. And if you don't, well, then you are part of the problem. Have a good day, and thank all of you for this
Thank
session.
you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.